Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Independent Short Film Festival. I'm Katie from Festival Formula, and today we're going to be speaking to some of the filmmakers featured in the Conflict 2 block. So just a very quick icebreaker question for all of our guests. Using just one word, how would you like an audience to feel after watching your film? Just one word. Yeah.
I'll say compassionate.
Yeah.
I would say disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
I would say self-reflective.
Oh, you snuck in a hyphen in there.
So what do we have, Simon?
Oh, come on.
Daniel, Jace?
Exhausted.
Yes, I can attest to that. How about you, Jace?
I guess disturbed is a good word for that.
Yeah, I was saying just a few moments ago, I watched all of these films together as you would in a block, but I watched them today, so they're very fresh in my mind. And I think what I found quite interesting is when you are given the thematic term conflict, you kind of have a preemptive strike in your mind of what that might be. And what I found quite fascinating is with all of these stories together, they are so many different facets of conflict, whether it be internal or if it be an external force or if it be a larger idea than the individual being. And they all moved and touched me in very, very different ways. And it's great to be able to talk to you about them, because I think with all these different stories going on, putting these together, it's actually quite an interesting tapestry. So I'm going to come to you, Tom, first with the hashtag Waynesville Strong. I feel like you've presented a completely unnerving glimpse of the future. This blend of reality and technology interaction as we're given choices we may not want to make ourselves. And I think what I really admired about your piece is that you completely hooked the viewer in with the humor and frustration of having to deal with technology. But then also you've kind of brought in this dark edge that unfurls as we hear and twist his own words and his own downfall. Did this idea come from a what if, or like tell us how you imagined this into being a short film?
Well, I feel like in America, we're living a massive what if right now, and it's not very pleasant. And, you know, I was trapped in, like probably many of these other people, trapped in lockdown, and was just like every day horrified by some new dissent of our government and new horror that you didn't think was imaginable, or chicanery that you didn't think was imaginable. And I just started to look at it as a math equation, and I just managed to kind of project where I thought the whole thing was going to go. And then even as I was rehearsing it with Nick, a lot of it started to happen. And I was like, oh shit, God damn it, I'm kind of accurate. And then as we continued, it got more and more bad. I'm talking specifically about the meat industry in the United States amidst COVID and obviously our horrible president and the complete lack of response to the COVID situation. So the idea actually came from a British filmmaker. I've always loved this film by Mike Leigh called A Sense of History, which is a monologue written by Jim Broadbent. And in it, he basically eviscerates all of British history and the class system and the government. And that's always been in my mind. It was always in my mind. And then I looked basically at the requirements of being in lockdown. And, you know, you can't have a lot of actors. You can't have a set. You can't really have a crew. And I was fortunate enough with Nick Sandow. He's from my theater company. We worked together for 25 years. He happens to be mildly famous at the moment, so I thought that there would be some attention on the film. And he's used to doing monologues of mine. He knows my work. And with theater people, you know, a theater company, you develop a kind of similar vocabulary, so you're able to kind of move quickly. And, you know, it was just this kind of little fever of shit hitting the fan, and what can we do about it as two actors living 25 blocks apart, locked in our houses, basically.
It's a good creative, like flexing that creative muscle with restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
I always find is quite challenging, but also it can bring up some really good fruitful ideas, because obviously I think at some point a filmmaker or writer has been involved in that kind of 48-hour film challenge, or, you know, doing, you know, what they call vomit drafts, of just vomiting something over a weekend and kind of, you know, putting it together. And I think what we've seen is an increase on what they call screen on screen films. So kind of, you know, looking at through Zoom or through Skype or through kind of self-recording. And it is very effective, because that's how a lot of people are having to engage with each other right now. I mean, I will say, like, as a consultancy company where we're sent films, we've been sent an awful lot of kind of lockdown / pandemic / COVID film. And what's interesting is it's not always that as a character, as a backdrop. And that's what I find quite interesting, is actually it's not always about, like, let's do a film about lockdown. It's actually about what comes out from the individual when you are forced to be locked down. And I think that was quite interesting.
Oh, thank you.
So next I'm going to talk to Jace, Candyman. Or I'm not calling you the Candyman, of course not. So this is an unsettling world where humans are coerced into an alternative state of perma-happiness by the way of milkshake. And I really hope that you take this as a compliment, but it really reminded me of Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun music video. Just in that kind of the insane smiles, doing the mundane. But I found Candyman is much more complex, and I have so many questions about that world, and I just want to be completely immersed into it. So what inspired you for this project? Because it is kind of left field, but it's kind of got a grounding in something really unnerving, and actually something quite, you know, it could be considered quite serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we went into creating this world, there was a lot of world building that we wanted to do. I think me and the company that I work for, like, are eventually trying to build worlds and stuff. But I think that the major thing with this film was I was talking to my mentor about just truth in general, and how it seems like a lot of people want to fight for truth. The second they get backed into a corner, nobody wants to stand up. So I think I was just playing with the theme of, you know, once you discover something and the truth behind it, are you willing to put, you know, stake in the game to fight for that truth? So that's kind of where we were just coming from, just playing with that theme. Because I think growing up, I've been on that pursuit of what is truth, what can I believe, with everything going on media-wise, what I'm told, what I, you know, need to go research on my own, stuff like that. I think I was just in a place where it's like, okay, once you discover something, like, am I willing to fight for that? So
it's very, I mean, it's a really interesting way to slip people into possibly having a broader thought about that process, because on the surface it's bright colors, it's unnerving, it's alternative, it's, you know, it's happy smiley faces, smiling in the face of everything going wrong. But I think the fact that you actually kind of manifest it into a person is something that makes it really, really unique, because it's coming from one person and they are actively making people and coercing them, which that's the unnerving part I found, is like, you know, when you have somebody who you can pin it on. And I suppose that, you know, constant pursuit of truth is always trying to find the truth, but then also find who's culpable for it. So yeah, that I feel like that's going to give me colorful nightmares in all of its milkshake glory.
great.
So Daniel and Amelia from ExDisposer, I'm a sucker for anything about music or bands, so that is kind of hands down. And also going out for a drummer for many years. I feel that pain. There's a line in your film which I feel completely sums up your character's angst, and it's when he says, "I was just thinking how much I love to play if it weren't for the crowds." And I just think that conflict of needing to do something that you know you're good at and that you can completely lose yourself in, but also is the crux of everything where it's stemming from. I kind of feel like this narrative and the execution of it completely just portrayed that brilliantly. And I also love, like, the really destructive nature coinciding with the drum sounds. And I don't know if that was your sound guy.
Yes, Will actually, who was just milling around in the background earlier, he was working on a experimental film, which was sort of a video self-portrait, where he sort of just like a looping image of himself, and then he scored sort of like sonically what his anxiety and nervousness and self-consciousness sounded like, and I asked him to do that for this movie, and it happened to include a lot of distorted drums and guitars and stuff like that, and it really fit the tone and the character very well. I'm really happy with that.
And your lead is phenomenal to watch, like that. I think sometimes when you have a character that has like complexity, especially when it's something physical, you kind of can't cheat it. You kind of have to have somebody that can really kind of bring it that depth and actually, bring their A game. And I think what I found quite unsettling with ExDisposer is how well he kind of portrayed this bubbling tension underneath him. Like, just can't kind of keep it down. I mean, Amelia, am I correct in saying that you were in the casting for this as well?
Yes, no, I was. I'm happy that I was on early enough to have an influence or be a part of the casting process. But yeah, we worked with a casting director named Adrian Stern. Everybody else in the film, we either cast ourselves or we found through friends in a very sort of like organic grassroots type way. But she helped us find our Andy, because we needed somebody that, like you said, can be this bubbling like pit of pain underneath that sort of he masks it very well, but when it's time for him to unleash it, he does, and he does it very brilliantly. So,
and can I ask, is he a drummer?
No,
he's not. Well,
he learned it. He was great. He had a friend that, like, after he was cast, he just had a very intense like drum teaching session. So every time he's banging it, he got very physical, like actual wounds on his hands and everything. But no, he's not an actual drummer. It was his first time.
Our cinematographer, however, Josh Echevarria, who does great work, is a drummer, and was very useful in some of the scenes where I think there's like one shot in there where he's actually not faking and he's playing the music, and that's because Josh was talking him through it.
That's good. I mean, if anything, I'm glad that you didn't say, our DOP was a drummer and he thought he was terrible. It's good that you had that kind of authenticity. And I will say, like, I think the reason why a lot of films about music are really successful, and I'm not talking about, musicals essentially, but the kind of the nuts and bolts of kind of putting music together, is because it is so affecting. And I think, we all have a piece of music or a band that we, thrash around to if we need to get out of stress, or, when we're happy, we put something on. I think, that there's a very kind of, entwined relationship between music and film. So yeah, I really enjoyed that film. So we're gonna move from drummers to raps. So, Duncan, this is where I bring you in from Exterminator. So let's talk about a battle of one-upmanship in the form of extermination. This film really surprised me because tonally it took me down a humour route and then completely had a darker undertone. And to be honest, it was both fun and absolutely gross. So thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, did you always have that final narrative beat as the ending narrative?
That's interesting. That took a while. I guess the seed of the idea, and sorry I was late. I won't bore you with the excuse, but the seed of the idea was I did have a mouse problem, and I seemed to go through so many different exterminators that I also kind of bonded with in a way, because it was I had either one mouse or 1,000 mice, I'm not sure, but they were chewing through wires in the walls. I just didn't know how to solve that problem, and it was that type of situation where you almost trauma bond with the person who's coming over the house very quickly, because they're the person you're depending on, and you're kind of putting a lot of faith in them because they're doing all this stuff behind the walls, and this kind of dark magic, and you just kind of have to have faith that they know what they're doing. So the seed of the idea, I guess, was this guy who's a little down on his luck, and he just wants to be able to solve this problem himself and have a little bit of a win in life. And the more this exterminator comes over and rakes him over the coals and kind of humiliates and emasculates him, the more it almost feels like is the rodent problem worth the exterminator personality problem. So I actually think the idea of the king rat and him slaying it was probably maybe the last piece of the puzzle when I wrote the little script. I wanted him to have some kind of win, you know, in front of it, whether you consider that a win or not, some kind of show of his toxic masculinity in some way. So.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, it's a very weird thing to say. I was pulling for, you know, the bum to kind of like get the rats. But I suppose, like, I will say that actor has the perfect face for that role. Like,
we were very lucky. Alan McLeod's a friend, and he's an amazing actor, and he's on this show I Love, You're the Worst, and he does comedy, and he brought so much to the part. Especially for me, when he's possibly poisoning her, he was physically sweating, his hands were trembling, all these things that made me look like a good director when I wasn't giving him any of those directions. So we were very, very lucky to have him.
Yeah, he has, you know, when you get those kind of comedy faces that they're so rubber that they just kind of completely own whatever reaction that you need them to have. But no, I just found that kind of, that narrative ending, that denouement of the story, just kind of both sublimely horrific but also hilariously dark at the same time, especially having it over a, you know, dinner party. So yeah, kudos for killing rats in the bathroom.
Yeah.
We don't have one of our filmmakers here tonight, actually, I've just noticed. So I'm just going to have a very, very quick kind of chat about Our Home Here, which is by Angela Chen. So the film hauntingly presents the plight of different versions of what it is to fit in and to be that model human being, all whilst aiming for the American dream. The intercutting of the younger brother and sister footage in and amongst the modern day, I felt was a really great texture to add, and that notion of innocence being a distant memory, but the present not being able to retain it. And if any of you haven't watched it yet, I do recommend that you do watch it. It is a very beautifully poignant piece, and kind of takes conflict in a very different manner from a lot of the other narratives that we're talking about here. I'm now going to come to you, Simon, for the ghastly fowl. There is one line in there, which obviously you are the writer, so, you know, I feel like I may be blowing your trumpet for you. But there's a line that says, "With no arms, there were no high fives." And I think if there's anything that pretty much sums up the lack of human interaction we can have with each other right now, that pretty much stuck with me. And it is just a perfect summation of the world right now. This is a very bleak fable. And the creatures created with the lenses and the cogs and blades, it's like an industrial nightmare, completely concocted by man. And that phrase, remorse code, oh, dagger.
When that came to me, I was like, ah! You know, I mean, there's moments when you know that you've been inspired by something outside of yourself, and you're like, people are going to give me credit for that. Yes, but it's not yours, right? It's not. It's something just came to you, and you're like, ah! You've never heard it anywhere else before, so technically you invented it. But I'm a big fan of the notion that we live in a quantum flux. So everything that you invent has come to you from the quantum field where it existed already as unmanifested potential. So you're just taking off a veil, you know, and revealing something that was already there and couldn't be seen by anybody else. So, but yes, Remorse Code I was thrilled with.
It's just something that, you know, when you get those little narrative fluctuations that kind of just really land, And it's like, and I've seen little, I call them like the good bits, and I don't mean to make that sound trite, but whenever you watch a film and there's just a little nuance in there that you go, oh, that really just hits, like it's like a little kind of ping in your brain.
But
And
did you find it a bleak piece? I mean, it ends with such an explosive hope, and out of all the films I saw, because I've seen all of them as well, it's the only one that didn't want to make me throw myself from a window or go call my therapist, you know, like, because it I mean, I loved all of them, don't get me wrong, and I'm a fan of horror movies and I'm a fan of bleak, but when I write these days, if I'm going to write something that starts dark, it has to end well, because I just can't bring myself to do that to myself or others. But I really enjoyed what the rats did to me. I really enjoyed what the drummer did to me. I enjoyed them all. I mean,
I think, I did find it bleak. It's a bleak beginning. I suppose if anything, you could see it as a warning. So you know what, you could see it back to front. You could see it that the ending, where it's this explosion of color and life and kind of unity, is actually kind of, you know, what we're aspiring to be.
Well, you know, there's the line, you know, would we be ready this time? We'd have to wait and see. Yeah. Maybe we'd remember our mistakes from the past. Maybe we'd do things differently. And I always loved, and I borrowed this concept, which is not even in the film as such, from, what's it called? With the Cylons who blow up the Earth and they're all looking for... Yeah, so Battlestar Galactica ends at the very end of the final season with them arriving on their final new home planet destination, having flashbacks, realizing they've all been there before, thousands of years ago, as they unearth old pottery and etchings on the walls. And then it cuts forward 35,000 years or 26,000 years, I think, which is the same as a full cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. And we've got new skyscrapers and new New Yorks and new San Franciscos and new everywheres, with different names, and it's all just about to start over again. And it's this idea that man has a choice, the human race has a choice always to have the ego rush off ahead and say, I know the way, or the heart to expand and open and connect all human beings together so that we can ascend as a conscious, sentient species out of adolescence and into something extraordinary. And we've always got to this place. And then there's been a fantastic, not so fantastic reset, which involves a lot of destruction and starting all over again from the bottom of the mountain. And this time, we're on that precipice again. Right now, what are we going to do? You know, and that's the message of the film. What are we going to do? And we must leave people with joy if we want them to do something good.
True, that is one way of looking at it.
Yeah,
I suppose, like, when I look at all of your films together, there is this recurring theme, obviously, of conflict in its different manners and different guises, but also that there is a point where every character has that choice, whether it be conscious or not, that they do have that point of, do I do something, do I not do something, whether that is kind of, you know, in hashtag Waynesville Strong, like, you know, opting in to kind of allow yourself to be completely consumed by your choices and that admittance of guilt, or whether it is the kind of, you know, in Candyman, when you've got that moment where somebody is so close to being pulled out of that kind of alternative reality, but just doesn't quite commit. I think the amazing stories that are in this block all make you feel something, whether or not it's, you know, absolute disgust, or whether or not it's kind of, you know, appeasing an idea, or actually kind of wanting to kind of see somebody do better. And I suppose that is the beauty of a short film block, is that you can sit there and you can have, you know, 6, 7, 8 stories kind of presented to you. And you may not like all of them. That is the beauty of a short film block, but they're going to do something to you. And as filmmakers and creatives, do you still have the ability to watch work that isn't your own content and still engage with it in a way that you want to as an audience member? And I realize that's very hard as a creative when you're flexing your own muscle, whether that be writer, director, producer. But do you, as the individual, do you completely engage as an audience member still?
Me, yes, I do. Absolutely. I suspend my disbelief, certainly. I mean, just going to the rat film, the moment when you're looking at that cup and you're looking at her put it to her lips, and I just had my heart in my mouth. I'm like, you see, and she was taunting him right up until the moment. I'm like, there was a part of me that knows he's thinking she deserves it. I was living terrifyingly vicariously through that character. I didn't want to. I was pulled in. So, I mean, certainly for me, if the story is good and if the writing is good and if the acting is good, my suspension of disbelief is taken from me. And I just get sucked in. So I love film, you know, for that reason. And I learn from experiences that are not my own, which then makes me a better writer in the future as well.
Interesting. So what about from either an actor's perspective or director or producer? Does anyone else want to chip in?
I'm sorry, the question is, do you still find yourself being able to be seduced by the medium?
Yeah.
I would say, for me personally, I started as an actor and then became a writer, director. I find that after doing it for a really long time, I have more shit to get out of the way in the beginning before I'm hooked in. And very often my wife is watching something and I'll just come in, stick my head in the room and I'll just watch it and I'll go, who's that guy? And she'll say, oh, he's the brother. I was like, he's the killer. And I realize I've blown it for her. But very often I'm wrong about something being dismissible. And those are the pieces, like I'm thinking right now about something like Schitt's Creek or Broadway, Babylon Berlin, this German show, where when I initially started watching them, I was just kind of like, something bugged me about some aspect of it. And then, but because my wife was watching it, I was like, let me stick into this. And then I got completely sucked in. Another one is Better Call Saul, the TV show.
Oh, yeah. I actually prefer it to Breaking Bad. Don't tell anyone.
Well, I didn't really like Breaking Bad. And so I just thought, oh, this is the Breaking Bad spinoff. You know, all they want to do is make money. Look at this. This is cheaply shot, blah, blah, blah. And then I find myself against all of my learned notions to just kind of go with it and be completely moved. So I guess we're all lucky in that way.
Yeah, I would just maybe add that I certainly, feel as enamored with, good television and good movies as always. I guess working and making my own films, I feel occasionally, there's a moment where you're a little more concentrated on and seeing I might be a little more finicky about writing and that kind of ruins something for me, but more often than not, besides just enjoying good films and good TV, I do feel like since I've made a few little things, I feel like they're all such miracles that anything ever gets even made that I even can watch something that maybe I'm not 100% engaged in and kind of enjoy it on a level of like, wow, I can't believe this even exists. This is, especially if it feels like a singular vision, even if it's not coming all together, just kind of the knowing the sheer human, I don't know, horsepower that has to go behind getting that vision on a screen can really kind of adds to the enjoyment in a way I probably didn't have when I was just a viewer.
Jace or Daniel, do you have any thoughts to chip in with?
I got to be honest. I probably don't find myself being as taken away by films as I was when I was younger, especially around the time when I was actually writing this film about 5 years ago, I guess. But it was, I think that has less to do with myself being a creator and more just part of getting older and living in the world. You see these sort of I don't know, the simulated experience of other people suffering is very different from actual suffering that you tend to like accrue as you become closer to other people. And I really am very mindful when I write, and especially when I was writing this film of just being honest and not worry about making the film as much as I am just treating the story like it was real. I actually I could go on about this and I won't, but I the film is really was written with it came from a place of me being dissatisfied with the way mental health was portrayed on screen, specifically with how the conflict of mental health and mental illness is sort of wedged into the or forced into the limits of how we view conflict in film, which is a beginning, middle, and end, mainly, and a series of choices, when really it's a conflict that almost has no origin. It's just something that is like a fact that a person has to deal with, and ultimately cannot stop. It can be improved upon, but has no end point. And you know, that I think that's what Simon was saying earlier about some of these films being a bit of a downer, and it certainly is, and I chose it that way. But you know, it's what I felt. So
but I think the way that you've handled it in that narrative is so effective, because there is no solution. There is no kind of denouement of an entire plot, because I think when you have, what I found really affecting in your film is when you have the therapy sessions going on, and when your lead has that fantastic monologue at the end where he actually vocalizes everything, he's completely open, he's completely exposed, and you could just see like that fear in the therapist's eyes going, but what number on the chart? Like, you know, trying to single it down to a really kind of like, you know, singular moment. And just when he kind of goes, just when he says like, it's a 4, like it's always been a 4. It's just the only time that he's really kind of opened up to it. And that I appreciated, because it doesn't try to give a solution, because it's an ongoing process. Sorry, Simon, you were going to say?
No, don't apologize. Yeah, no, I mean, I was angry, really angry at the end of that film, but I also have enormous respect for the way that you ended it, because the thing for me, I mean, obviously art is supposed to provoke a reaction, and it wasn't just, you know, you obviously have something you want to say about the way mental health is treated in movies. I think you also said something enormously powerful about the way mental health is treated in real life, because after she freaks out and says, what number on the chart, which reminded me of the woman in Donnie Darko trying to do the love and the fear chart. It's that like, well, if it doesn't fit into this box, my brain breaks. Then she goes, I mean, he speaks in that meeting, like more than he has, more really, about this boulder and this stuff and the guts coming out, and it's so visceral and so passionate and so quiet and so in pain. And then she congratulates some woman called Amanda for her share that we didn't even hear, and the movie just ends, and you're just like he will never share again. And that does happen in real life. And you know what, I wanted to throw, I didn't have popcorn or a big fizzy drink, but I would have thrown them both at my computer screen had I had them. I was furious, but I was furious because I was treating the film like it was real. And so you made a really important, I can't remember his name.
Andy, yeah, you're feeling Andy's anger, and that's yeah.
Or maybe yours, but like, I thank you for putting that out there, because other people will feel that rage too, and then they will maybe have a look, if they've got mental health issues and they're in group therapy or one-to-one therapy or something, is it actually working for them? And is the person who's helping them, are they actually helping? Do they have backbone, or do they just have credentials on paper? You know, we like things tidy and clean, and we think that ugly is embarrassing and reputation is important. All these things which go in the opposite direction to actually sorting out. But I don't believe that challenge has no ending. I don't believe it goes on forever. I do think that there is a place a person can step into where they move out of mental analysis and into a space that means that you raise your frequency above the level of challenge, and then you can see your way out of it. I hope that's true, because if it's not, I'm ending it all tomorrow.
All I will say though, like, I always loved all these Q&As, especially with Daniel, because he always, even though I think I know this film and it was such a big part of my own journey as a creator, like I was the therapist, right? Addressing this film, thinking that it was about something else, thinking it was very surface layer, and not fully understanding even Daniel's way of portraying this, because it was nothing I had experienced before, right? I never understood anxiety, especially in that way, like this very specific way that you don't see anywhere or I haven't experienced. And I think it's fun. It's not fun, but it's interesting how I do still like, I'm on sort of the another opposite side where I do still feel like, yes, I can watch short films and feel like I'm learning something. But I do feel, because I worked with Daniel and had like actually got myself dirty with like this one particular vision that I was learning about. I think that I have, like, for myself, I found a balance of understanding like you can actually find entertainment that, you know, invigorates you as a creator and filmmaker, but like going against your own intuition and like letting yourself know you're not always right. Like, I don't know what every single creator's vision is, and letting them assert themselves and letting like Daniel be like, I'm clear that this is the way that it's going to go. You know, the edit, the choices, you know, it's fun how like uncomfortable I was sometimes just acknowledging that fact, but it made such a better film because it is Daniel's vision and his story, and it's honest. And that's the point, you know, it's the honesty and all of this. So yeah, I'm kind of like split down the middle.
But it's so heartbreaking. I mean, with films like that, I just want to see maybe at the end, you know, after the credits, like a 30-second, like, I don't know, plaster, bandage, you know, phone number or something, because we don't just want to look at the problems. We really want the solutions. You know, we live in a messed up world where everybody's polarizing at the moment. And this is a really important time for the human race to work out if we can get together or if we're going to go for another one of those big resets back to a dark age. You know, it's like we move forward or we move back. We can't stay on the fence for much longer. It's gonna happen. So I'm noticing as well, you know, I was going to be talking all about my film tonight, the film that I wrote this, right? But actually, because The Ghastly Fowl, which is fantastic, and I love it, and I loved working on it with Shruti and Kate, and it was amazing, but it ends with a question, and it ends with a question after we've seen what's possible when people remember their mistakes from the past, remember that they are actually simply one consciousness exploring itself through many bodies, and that by working together to wake up from something that we thought was real life, we absolutely swore it was, and it turns out that it's an illusion locking us into a very small box based on our own personal and shared fears. There's not an awful lot to talk, but there's lovely things to discuss. But actually, when we talk about films where the conflict is not resolved, there's much more room for dialogue about those in these sorts of Q&As. And I didn't see that coming.
That's the beauty of short film. I think there's communication. It's an engager. Like, you know, films that you watch aren't necessarily to your taste or to the character that you generally fall for. But I think when you're taken on that journey, sometimes against your better judgment, that you are actually taken to places that maybe you hadn't considered before. I just wanted to come back, Jace. Can you watch films as a filmmaker still, or do you kind of find yourself removed and kind of have this filter of, well, I wouldn't do it that way, I'd do it this way, or how do you feel?
I think that I go back and forth. I think the second I started becoming a filmmaker, I look at it with a technical eye, but I'm definitely still inspired a lot by other creators. Because I mean, Candyman was like the first film that I actually really ever made. So I think I'm constantly still inspired by, like, honestly, everybody's films here. I think everybody has like a theme that they were really pushing for. And I think that was something I was talking to my producers about. It's like, I really want to learn how to like dive deeper into these themes. And I get really inspired when I see other films that can really portray those. I mean, I'm really inspired by like Lord of the Rings and things like that. So I kind of see that with everybody else's films and how they're able to really like deep dive into a theme and just explore that. And I think that's something that I'm really trying to do. So I still get inspired by films and love watching like short films, because I think I'm always a firm believer of be the worst in the room so that I can learn from others. And I think I've seen everybody else's films and I'm definitely inspired, and it like helps me learn what I want to do for the next time. So
That's a good way of putting it, be the worst in the room. But I would say, like, I didn't realize this was your first film. So, you know, kudos to you. Because if that's your first film, I would love to see what you do next. So we are drastically over time, and I would love to carry on talking to all of you for a whole lot longer. Like, I could probably talk to all of you individually about your film for hours on end, but unfortunately I'm not allowed to. It's been a pleasure speaking to all of you, and I wish you a great festival, and also for the other festivals that you have in your circuit run at the moment. Thank you to the audience for watching this block, and I hope you've found some interesting tidbits from the filmmakers behind them, and we do hope that you tune in to what else the festival has to offer. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great films, everybody. Thank you.